What does one do when one is sent the key to someone's front door? This is a question asked in Jericho, the fourth novel by Dirk Bogarde. The blurb on the back of this 1992 Penguin edition describes the plot as such. Writer William Caldicott's life is complicated enough. He's about to embark on divorce proceedings when he receives a cryptic letter of farewell from his estranged brother James, together with the key to his house in a remote French village. William, out of exasperation, duty, or self-dissatisfaction, accepts the key and begins to look for James. Gradually, as he begins to unravel the complexities of his brother's strange life, he discovers things that even as a writer, he could never remotely have imagined. Written between 1986 and 1991, Jericho is part mystery, part character study, part travelogue. Throughout the book, Bogarde weaves in these three disparate elements, each one becoming a different lens through which to approach the story. The author never fully commits to one specific reading. Instead, there's a kind of push-pull between the three separate elements, imbuing the book with a certain inherent tension. Its contradictions and its reluctance to satisfy the expectations of the reader or the requirements of genre become compelling but also confounding in their own way. It's within these contradictions that the book becomes something more than just a generic mystery, more than a character study, but something that I suspect had a far more personal resonance for its author. Jericho is, or could be seen as, a kind of distorted self-portrait, an attempt to grapple with the traumas and contradictions of Bogarde's own life, where personal clarity or catharsis is achieved by turning himself into a mystery to be investigated, and then placing that mystery within a fictionalized, vaguely unreal facsimile of the French Riviera locations where the author found home. More specifically, perhaps, Jericho feels like an attempt by Bogarde to see himself through the eyes of somebody else. For the uninitiated, Dirk Bogarde was one of the leading British actors of the post-war era. Famed for his collaborations with directors like Basil Dearden, Joseph Losey, and later Luchino Visconti, Bogarde established a formidable and often fearless reputation, delivering exceptional, enlivening performances in early films as varied as The Blue Lamp, Doctor in the House, Cast a Dark Shadow, and Ill Met by Moonlight. As an actor, Bogarde would later gravitate towards more challenging, uncompromising material which spoke to the horrors and conflicts that he had encountered in his own life. During the last days of the Second World War, the young Bogarde had been one of the first Allied officers to reach the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. In his memoirs, he talks of the lifelong horror of this experience, comparing it to Dante's Inferno, the gates of the camp as the literal gates of hell. This experience had a transformative effect on Bogarde's outlook, his well-being, and his general disposition. Combined with his sudden rise to stardom following the war and his apparent lifelong struggle with his sexuality, it's not difficult to see such roles as a kind of therapy for the actor, a way of reconciling his own trauma, his own internalized self-loathing, through the lives of these fictional, often repellent characters. Many of Bogarde's later films deal explicitly with themes like the rise of fascism, the relationship between the abuser and abused, and the spectre of moral decay rotting at the heart of 20th century Europe. We see this in films like The Servant, The Damned, Death in Venice, The Night Porter, and Despair. The latter being the story of a man who psychologically steps outside of himself in order to better evaluate his own condition, and who attempts to escape his own suffocating circumstances by projecting his own life onto the life of a double, something that seems oddly familiar to the context of Jericho. In Victim from 1961, Bogarde would even make a film that dealt explicitly with the then criminalisation of homosexuality by UK law, giving British cinema one of its first sympathetic depictions of gay life, as well as an impassioned condemnation of the abuse and exploitation that the LGBT community faced as a direct result of those same criminal laws. A bold and brave role for a mainstream actor to accept at a time when homophobia was both commonly accepted and encouraged, and when being outed as gay or bisexual could likely destroy a person's career. This framing of Bogarde's life and career feels important to this discussion of Jericho. Without wishing to spoil the experience of the book, it's enough to say that an aspect of the story deals openly and explicitly with the theme of homosexuality, and that Bogarde's writing on homosexuality exposes many of the same conflicts and contradictions that seem to manifest as a part of his own personal sexual identity. Despite moments of dry humour, the tone of Jericho is frequently bitter. The disbelieving homophobia of the central character, William Caldecott, and his attempts to grapple with the conflicting sexuality of his missing brother James can be challenging for a modern reader. But I think it's an essential part of the book's inherent psychodrama and how it relates to Bogarde's own conception of the self. It is, fundamentally, a book about letting go, about change and acceptance, about buried secrets and reconciliation. And this tension is explicit in the way the protagonists must come to terms with the reality of these revelations and the existence of people, communities, and ways of living that are beyond the grasp of his own parochial, sheltered way of life. In its style and storytelling, the book felt to me like the potential source material for some unmade European art film. This perhaps isn't surprising given Bogarde's background as an internationally acclaimed actor and the types of films he tended to gravitate towards. This is, after all, an actor who worked with screenwriters like Harold Pinter and Frederick Raphael, who appeared in films adapted from the works of Lawrence Durrell and Vladimir Nabokov. One expects a certain appeal to the unusual, the creative, the unconventional from Bogarde, and Jericho certainly delivers this. Reading the book, I thought of the films of Michelangelo Antonioni, films like L'Avventura, Blow Up, The Passenger, films framed around a central mystery, a missing person, a conspiracy to murder, the theft of a dead man's identity, but where the mystery is inconsequential. It's merely an engine that drives the machine. Like Antonioni, what's important to Bogarde is what the mystery tells us about the central character, his world, and his perception of the world and of himself. The existential questions and conundrums, the inner conflicts of psychology, the mood and the atmosphere of a particular place are all just as important as the central plot. Place is a character for Bogarde, and he goes to extraordinary lengths to evoke the significance of the setting, bringing it to life with the most vivid descriptive language, capturing its changing light, its topography, its hymns and rhythms. Through the strength of the writing, Bogarde paints the world of Jericho with the same clarity and vision with which he paints the image that adorns the cover of this 1992 edition. Bogarde as artist again, like the missing James Caldecott. The title Jericho is rich with associations of place. It refers both to the titular cottage of the missing brother, which becomes a place of refuge and retreat, as well as to the city in the West Bank of Palestine, itself having existed as both a refuge as well as a place of conflict. However, it's also the name of the abandoned village high up in the hills of the book's fictional Sainte-Basile setting. The constant appearance and acknowledgement of this village becomes a looming reminder that all things eventually pass, that brick and stone may survive preserved against the march of time, but that life and family are impermanent. The symbol of the village is rife with visual metaphor, the sense of home, abandoned, displaced. A literal ghost town high on the precipice of these great looming cliffs, cleaved by the elements, now facing an actual extinction. The lost village, inaccessible, unsafe, used as a firing range by local military, underlines those same themes of home, conflict, loss, and ruin. As a mystery, Jericho is languorous, embittered, even anticlimactic. Its clues exist in the spaces between scenes or in the things left unsaid. But Bogarde gives us enough questions to keep us engaged, to keep us, like the protagonist, seeking answers. There's a sense here that the mystery and its resolution is more important in reconciling and providing closure and understanding for the central character than it is for the satisfaction of the reader. Likewise, as a character study, the reader must contend with the reality that William Caldecott isn't at all sympathetic as a character. He's often boorish, priggish, judgmental, distant, and objectifying in how he views and discusses the various supporting characters and their little corner of the world. It's not a book for readers who need to feel a sense of kinship with a character, or to see a character as a likeable or aspirational mirror to themselves, but more of an opportunity to engage via the perspective and experience of the character with certain themes, ideas, and emotions. There's also that sense of the travelogue. But even here the book is deceptive, with the fictional Barge-Montsaliev, Sainte-Basile and Sainte-Brigitte becoming as much central characters in this engaging drama as our protagonists. But at the same time, these illusory surrogates for real places and settings are unreal, idealised, artificial. Nonetheless, the drama is expressed in this fictionalised landscape, the conflicts implicit in the evocation of the elements, the changing seasons, the dying light. Perhaps this is why so many readers have taken issue with the book. Rather than reject it for its dated or clumsy observations on disability, which is certainly problematic by contemporary standards, or for Bogarde's complicated reckoning with his own sexuality, it's this unwillingness to play by the rules, to satiate our need for answers, for plot, for that great catharsis of a concluding confrontation that have led many readers to reject Jericho. That's the perception, at least from the frequent one-star reviews the book has generated on sites like Goodreads. But I have to say, despite some contentious elements, I found Jericho incredibly engaging, thought-provoking, and most of all incredibly well written. To give you a flavour of Bogarde's style as a writer, I want to share this brief passage. The dark, as always in Provence, had taken me by surprise. It would seem that quite a lot of things in Provence took me by surprise, but the fall of night was extraordinarily rapid, ravishingly lovely. A vague suggestion of twilight steals upon the brilliance of day. The sky slowly bleeds away from intense blue to bleached blue, to softest mother of pearl streaked suddenly with the faintest lemon tendrils, and then the sun begins to die in a ripple of tiny scarlet and orange waves of vapour. There is suddenly a perfect tangible silence, a breath held. The evening fades away and night has fallen. The air was still warm. The tiles of the little terrace beyond the open front door retained the heat of the sun. The dog, a Dalmatian, lay in a wide-legged sprawl. The scent of wallflowers mingled with the freshness of damp earth. She had been watering the pots and urns when I arrived, and from a distance, somewhere in the valley, the frogs began to fiddle and cry. A star appeared. Bats swung silently against the dark sky, attracted by the beam of light which spilled out across the terrace as Martha lit an oil lamp on the small table at my elbow. The entire book is written like this. I've seen other reviews take issue with Bogarde's overly descriptive prose, but for me I found it mesmerising. It was a joy to soak in the atmosphere that Bogarde evokes, luxuriating in the descriptions of people and places, and both compelled and enlivened by the incredibly cinematic way in which he writes those terse interactions between characters. In 1994, Bogarde would publish a sequel to Jericho, A Period of Adjustment. This picks up directly where the first book left off. I haven't read it yet, but I'm incredibly eager to find out how this stands up against Jericho. So if you've stayed with me through this video, I just want to say thank you very much. It's really much appreciated. This is my first attempt at reviewing a book on camera. It's my first attempt at making a video like this. It's not something that comes naturally or easy to me. I'm not very comfortable on camera. I'm not hugely articulate. And so if you have found any enjoyment from this video, if you've taken any interest from this video, then I'll be absolutely thrilled. I've had Elsa the cat with me for moral support. She's been snoozing away in the background, making sure that I don't get too terrified of the prospect of having to sit in front of a camera and talk. So I just want to end this video by saying, if you've read Jericho or if you've read A Period of Adjustment, I'd love to know what you thought about them in the comments. If you've read any of Bogarde's other writing, his autobiographies, some of his other novels, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your recommendations. If you're a fan of Dirk Bogarde as an actor, what are your favourite films by Bogarde? What are the performances of his that you like the best? I'd absolutely love to hear from you. So once again, thank you very much for watching this video. I might attempt to do another one. I might not. I don't know. We'll see how this one goes. If it all goes well, then I'm sure myself and Elsa the cat will be back again next time to talk about another book. Thank you very much.